Just before we get into the video today, I do want to say that I've recently started a new channel. It's called Biographics. We do long-form, 20-minute-ish biographies of people from history as well as the present day, politicians, but a whole lot else. Please check out the link in the description below, and if you like biographics, please subscribe. Anyway, while everybody has their eyes on North Korea, another nuclear program still worries those in the White House. That is the nuclear program of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This country has such a bad reputation that when we talk about it, it can feel like we're talking about one of those places that only exists in the movies. One of those countries dominated by evil leaders who dream of destroying the world. Well, there might actually be some truth to this, but definitely not as much as some seem to think. In fact, Iran is not the most religious, it's not the most authoritarian, and it's not even the most hostile place towards women in this part of the world, because we have Saudi Arabia, which is far, far worse. Dear viewer, Iran, it is a country of contradictions, a country whose government claims to work under a democratic system, but at the same time everything is under the control of one man. That man would be Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader. Even though at first glance he isn't as scary as his predecessor, Ruhollah Khomeini, who was scary just to look at. The truth is, Khamenei can't stand anything modern. For him, modernity might as well have come from Satan himself. Oh, except for nuclear technology, of course. That explains why in the past few years Iran has been famous for two things. Number one, being one of the countries alongside China where the most people are executed every year, and number two, wanting to build their own nuclear bomb. However, unlike what has happened with the North Korean crisis, the US and Iran, they did reach an agreement. In 2015, President Obama led the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, an agreement to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear bomb, and an agreement that many have considered to be one of the greatest achievements in all of foreign policy.
It's now more than 50 years since President Kennedy stood before the American people and said, "Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate."
Although, to be fair, all signs seem to point to the conclusion that this agreement has not kept either party satisfied. The President of the United States, now Donald Trump, is pretty clear about his opinion on the deal. Ever since he was a candidate, he has described it as the worst agreement ever negotiated. During his campaign, Trump has vowed on many, many occasions that his top priority would be to put an end to such a catastrophic agreement.
I've been doing deals for a long time. I've been making lots of wonderful deals, great deals. That's what I do. Never, ever, ever in my life have I seen any transaction so incompetently negotiated as our deal with Iran.
And do not think that this was the typical campaign message that every politician repeats over and over again, but then soon forgets about, well, once the election has finished. In his first speech at the UN Assembly, Trump repeated it loud and clear.
The Iran deal was one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States has ever entered into. Frankly, that deal is an embarrassment to the United States, and I don't think you've heard the last of it, believe me.
They haven't done so yet, but it is true that both the president and many other members of the Republican Party loathe, yes, absolutely loathe this agreement. And they do so because, among other things, agreements were also signed with North Korea.
This is a good deal for the United States. North Korea will freeze and then dismantle its nuclear program. South Korea and our other allies will be better protected.
And, well, these agreements, they didn't work at all, except for allowing Pyongyang to lay their hands on the bomb. Well, now you might be wondering, why exactly is it such a controversial agreement? Well, we're going to look at that in a bit. Before we do, let's take a look at the context in which it was signed.
Iran, a budding superpower?
So, during the Cold War, it is said that the Russians were so obsessed that they saw a Chinese man behind every tree. Something similar might now actually be happening between Iran and the USA. Since the Islamic Revolution of Khamenei in 1979, Iran has become one of Washington's worst enemies. It has accused Tehran of being the first sponsor of radical and anti-American groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, or the Taliban, not to mention their support of the Syrian regime under Bashar al-Assad. But there is more to this. Washington knows very well that Iran, it's not just any country. Look, Iran is absolutely huge. It's got 80 million inhabitants and one of the greatest amounts of mineral wealth on Earth. And hey, it's not just about oil and natural gas here, but it's also got other minerals like copper, iron, zinc, uranium, silver, etc. But yes, we do all know that oil and natural gas, well, they're particularly important. And that is why I now want to ask you a question. What is the biggest fear of many analysts in Washington? Well, that is the sum of Iraq and Iran. So let me explain. Both countries, they're neighbors. They have a majority Shiite rule, and influence of Tehran on Baghdad has skyrocketed in the last few years. If we add up the oil reserves of both countries, the amount is one of the largest in the world. It's larger than Saudi Arabia, it's larger than Venezuela. So coordinated international politics between these two countries would result in a superpower which is outside the control of Washington, with almost 120 million people. And that's not mentioning all of those other natural resources. This, quite simply, would be an incredible amount of influence. So then, what would happen if Iran got a hold of a nuclear bomb? Now, on the one hand, it would certainly consolidate its role as an international superpower, as well as its influence over its allies like Iraq. But on the other hand, it would also trigger an arms race with Saudi Arabia and the Emirate countries that have already said they won't be left behind if Tehran manages to get a nuclear bomb. And the result of all this, well, that's pretty obvious. It's tension, it's risk of proliferation, it's risk of nuclear disaster, and also a loss of American leverage in the area. It goes without saying that seeing such radical governments in possession of such powerful weapons also doesn't make anyone feel particularly safe. Well, that was the situation when the agreement was reached back in 2015.
The deal.
For years, the United States has tried to stop the nuclear program with financial penalties, but these were pretty darn useless. Did they harm the economy in Iran? Well, absolutely, but they did nothing to stop their nuclear program. So finally, on November the 14th of July 2015, the nuclear deal, it was signed. An agreement with a clear target to prevent proliferation and make sure Iran only uses nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. However, since then, the deal, it has suffered harsh attacks. We're going to have a look at some of the reasons cited by critics of this agreement, but first, I think now is a good time to think about the circumstances under which this agreement was signed. And the first thing we need to know is that the nuclear program in Iran is very, very advanced. According to US intelligence, if the agreement was to be broken, Iran could develop its first nuclear bomb in a matter of months. This is the way it is today, 2017, and it was even truer back in 2015 when the Iranian program was working at its fullest capacity. That is why I want to take a moment to think about three possible outcomes here: war, agreement, or Iran with nuclear capability. So, stopping the nuclear program with military intervention, it would not have been an easy task. It would have resulted in many victims, the cost for the US would have been prohibitive, and the US would have had to keep military intervention in the Middle East for decades. To compare, it is estimated that this would be the Iraq War multiplied by 5. Because it's one thing to destroy infrastructure, and it's a very different thing to eliminate the knowledge that a country has to make nuclear bombs. Obama knew that this situation was totally impossible. What he wanted was to get away from the Middle East and not get into any more trouble in this region, because it's been something of a chronic nightmare for the United States. But sure, on the other hand, not doing anything would have meant that Iran would have gotten their new toy, and as we have seen, it would have resulted in an arms race in the region, which Washington didn't want either. So an agreement, it was the only option left. We make a deal and everyone's happy, right? Just wait there a second, because despite that, many experts, especially Republicans, don't even want to hear about this pact.
This is a bad deal. Obama broke every rule of negotiation.
We get an agreement of very questionable value.
If I am elected president on the very first day in office, I will rip to shreds this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal.
Look, the Iranians have been given a blank check, basically, by the President of the United States.
So, are they all just war hawks determined to impose their ideas by force? Well, maybe there are some like that, but the truth is, they also have a point. They say, and they are right, that the US already signed many agreements with North Korea, and Pyongyang never kept its word, which is why North Korea is now a nuclear power. They are convinced that Iran will do the same, and there is no better evidence than the fact that Iran has not stopped their ballistic missile program.
Iran is boosting its missile capabilities in order to increase the accuracy, precision, and range. Iran will not stop its missile projects.
And this program, well, is being developed with North Korean technology. So it seems clear which way a deal with Iran will go.
We cannot let a murderous regime continue these destabilizing activities while building dangerous missiles, and we cannot abide by an agreement if it provides cover for the eventual construction of a nuclear program.
Besides, since the pact has a limited duration, Iran could still put itself in a position to get its arsenal the moment the deal is over, and it could be armed within a matter of months. However, as we have seen, the alternatives, they're really not any better. And you know what? Iran doesn't necessarily need to go the way of North Korea.
Iran. Benefits of the agreement.
I'm pretty sure many of you are thinking that comparing North Korea and Iran is easy. After all, both countries are radical dictatorships, right? Well, I mean, not really. To be fair, things there are quite a bit different. Iranian society is much more open-minded than North Korean society. In Iran, there is a well-formed middle class, there are political debates, and things like having a smartphone and access to the internet, it's really quite common. In fact, most Iranians, especially the younger generation, are clearly pro-agreement. You see, it's not just a matter of international politics, it's also a matter of quality of life. The penalties put in place by the international community, they were very damaging for Iran. Look, in 2013, when President Ahmadinejad, the main defender of the agreement, left power, the economy of Iran, it was devastated. Foreign investment vanished, the unemployment rate skyrocketed, inflation grew to around 40%, and expectations for improvement weren't high. In short, it was a complete mess. But thanks to the agreement, the penalties started to disappear, and since then, oil exports have tripled. I mean, Iraq is not North Korea. They need the trade and the economic advantages that this agreement has brought.
The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action will produce the comprehensive lifting of all UN Security Council sanctions, as well as multilateral and national sanctions related to Iran's nuclear program, including steps on access in areas of trade, technology, finance, and energy.
The hope for Obama's administration was that with a more prosperous and trade-open Iran, the younger, more open-minded generation would be allowed to take power in a few years. However, those who oppose the agreement argue it's necessary to be more demanding with Iran because otherwise it will eventually become another North Korea, a new nuclear power. Anyway, it's not an easy situation as you can see, but truth be told, I think it would be a mistake to think that any pact is bad until proven otherwise. Having Tehran under pressure might be a good strategy, but let's be careful not to go too far, or we could all lose. Well, now it's your turn. If you were the President of the United States, what do you think you would do with Iran? Would you make a deal? Well, leave your answer in the comments below as well as in this survey, and I do really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do not forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday, and don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine, and well, if you're looking for something else to watch, please do check out my brand new channel Biographics. There's a link in the description below, and as always, thank you for watching.